Imagine you drop onto an island with 100 strangers. You have nothing, no weapon, no armor, no plan. And somewhere out there, 99 other people are hunting you. The circle is closing. The tension is so thick you forget to breathe. And for millions of players around the world, that feeling was not just a game. It was an obsession. It was PUBG. And for one brief, electric moment in gaming history, it was absolutely everything. But then, almost as fast as it rose, it started to fall. And the story of how that happened is one of the most fascinating rises and crashes in the entire history of video games. So stay with me, because this story is far deeper than you think. Before PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds even existed as a game, the idea behind it was already being born inside the mind of one man. His name is Brendan Greene, an Irish game designer who, by his own admission in a 2018 GDC talk, was not a traditional game developer. He was a photographer, a web designer, a DJ. He was someone who had spent years jumping between careers before he finally found the thing that consumed him completely. And that thing was a 2012 mod for the military simulation game ARMA 2. That mod was called Days, created by Dean Hall, and it had introduced the world to the concept of open-world survival with permadeath. Greene did not create Days, but he played it obsessively. And then he took the survival concept it established and pushed it in an entirely different direction. He created his own mod, which he called Battle Royale, borrowing the name from Koushin Takami's 1999 Japanese novel. The novel depicted a government program where students were forced to fight each other until only one survived. The idea translated perfectly into gaming. Drop a large group of players into a shrinking space, scatter weapons across the map, and let them fight until only one person or one team remains. Greene tested versions of this concept in ARMA 2, then ARMA 3, and eventually collaborated with a small South Korean studio called Bluehole to build a standalone version from the ground up. That standalone version was PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, and it launched on Steam Early Access on March 23, 2017. What happened next was not normal. It was not even close to normal. Within the first month, PUBG had sold over 1 million copies. That number is remarkable on its own. But PUBG did not stop there. It kept climbing. By June 2017, it had crossed 4 million copies sold. By August, that number had doubled to 8 million. Players were not just buying the game. They were streaming it, clipping it, sharing it, screaming about it on Reddit and Discord and Twitter. The streamers on Twitch discovered PUB and built entire careers on it almost overnight. Names like Der Disrespect, Shroud, and Summit 1G became synonymous with the game. Shroud in particular became famous for his almost inhuman accuracy inside PUB, and his streams regularly pulled hundreds of thousands of concurrent viewers. The game had a magnetism that was difficult to explain rationally. It was rough, it was unpolished, it ran poorly on most computers, and none of that mattered at all, because the experience it delivered was unlike anything players had felt before. The tension of the final circle, the silence before a firefight, the pure adrenaline of knocking an enemy and then scrambling to find a pan. There was a pan in the game, a frying pan that could block bullets when worn on your back, and it became iconic because it perfectly captured what made PUB special. It was chaos, but it was honest chaos. It was a world where anything could happen. And players loved it with a fierceness that caught the entire industry off guard. By December 2017, the game sold over 30 million copies. On Steam alone, PUB hit a peak of 3.5 million concurrent players in January 2018. It shattered records held for years. The game was not just popular, it was a phenomenon. If you want to be part of this community, subscribe to the Inventor realm right now. We cover the stories behind the games and the decisions that shaped the industry. Now, here is where the story starts to get complicated. While PUBG was breaking records, a different game was watching very closely. That game was Fortnite, developed by Epic Games. Originally launched as a cooperative survival game called Save the World, it had not made a major splash. Then Epic changed everything. They built their own Battle Royale mode in roughly 2 months and released it for free in September 2017, completely free. Where PUBG was selling for $30, Fortnite cost nothing. And it had building mechanics that PUBG did not have. It had a bright, cartoon visual style that ran smoothly on almost any machine. It had cross-platform support and launched on consoles. The shift was seismic. By early 2018, Fortnite had overtaken PUBG on Twitch. Younger players gravitated toward its accessible mechanics. The cultural gravity started moving, celebrity endorsements, athletes, and musicians. Everyone seemed to be playing Fortnite. Drake played Fortnite with Ninja in March 2018 in a stream that broke Twitch viewership records, cementing its place in history. PUBG was suddenly on the defensive for the first time since its launch, and the game had not yet fixed its most serious problems. Those problems were real, and they were significant. Throughout 2017 and into 2018, PUBG players dealt with severe performance issues. The game ran on Unreal Engine 4 and was notoriously demanding on hardware. It often delivered poor frame rates even on high-end systems. Players reported frequent stuttering, long loading times, and inconsistent hit registration. Hit registration is the system that determines whether your bullet actually connects with an enemy. There were buildings that players could fall through, vehicles that exploded for no clear reason. The sync issues created situations where players died to shots that should have missed entirely. The game's subreddit filled up with compilation clips of these bugs. And while early adopters had tolerated the roughness with affection, newer players arriving after seeing Fortnite's polished experience were far less forgiving. Then came the cheating crisis. PUBG Corporation had identified and banned over 13 million accounts for cheating by the end of 2017. The majority of these cheats originated from third-party software being sold online. Cheats that provided aimbots and wall hacks were widespread enough that honest players encountered them regularly. PUBG Corporation sued cheat software makers in multiple jurisdictions. But the damage to player experience had already been done. Trust erodes slowly and then all at once. PUBG Corporation also had a complicated year in terms of its relationship with the broader gaming community. The company filed a lawsuit against Epic Games in January 2018 in South Korea. The lawsuit alleged that Fortnite had copied elements of PUBG's user interface and overall design. The lawsuit was ultimately dropped by September 2018, but the episode gave the impression of a company that was more focused on legal battles than on fixing its own product. At least from the perspective of public perception, the game did make genuine efforts to improve. New maps arrived, including Miramar, the desert map, and later Sanhok, a smaller, faster-paced jungle map that was genuinely beloved by the community. The company invested heavily in anti-cheat technology. Performance patches rolled out consistently. A ranked mode was introduced. A new training ground was added. These updates showed that PUBG Corporation was listening, and the game never stopped being played by a massive audience. But the peak was gone, the cultural moment had passed. By the end of 2018, Steam concurrent player numbers had dropped dramatically from that January 2018 peak of 3.25 million to figures closer to 800,000. That was still an enormous player base by any reasonable standard. Most games would celebrate 800,000 concurrent players as an extraordinary achievement, but for PUBG, it represented a loss of roughly 75% of its peak concurrent audience in under a year. The narrative in the gaming press shifted from calling PUBG a revolution to asking whether it was being left behind. New competition arrived relentlessly. Respawn Entertainment launched Apex Legends in February 2019 with zero marketing warning, and it pulled in 25 million players within its first week. Apex Legends brought innovations to the genre, including a ping system that made communication between teammates effortless even without voice chat, a revival mechanic that reduced the punishing nature of early elimination, and a movement system built around smooth, fluid sliding and wall jumping. It felt closer to a premium action game than a survival simulation. Call of Duty then entered the Battle Royale space with Warzone in March 2020. And Warzone's integration with the existing Call of Duty ecosystem gave it an immediate installed base and brand recognition that no competitor could easily match. Each of these new entries took players, took streamers, took cultural momentum. PUBG's response came in January 2022. Krafton announced that the game would transition to a free-to-play model, PC and console. It was a significant decision, and it reflected a practical reality. The game needed new players. The $30 price tag had become a barrier when every major competitor was offering either a free version or a deeply discounted entry point. The transition to free-to-play triggered a temporary surge, with Steam concurrent numbers spiking again before settling into a new baseline. The game introduced a cosmetics-based monetization system to replace the previous purchase revenue, which is a standard model in the live-service gaming industry. PUBG Mobile, which had launched in 2018 through a partnership with Tencent and Lightspeed and Quantum, had long since become arguably the more culturally significant version of the game in global terms. By 2021, PUBG Mobile had surpassed 1 billion downloads in markets across South Asia, Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and Latin America. PUBG Mobile was not just a popular game, it was the game. It defined how an entire generation of mobile gamers experienced competitive multiplayer. The mobile version was eventually replaced by a separate title called Battlegrounds Mobile India for the Indian market after regulatory complications. And New State Mobile was launched as a next-generation follow-up in 2021, though New State struggled to match the original mobile game's reception. Brendan Greene himself departed from PUBG Corporation in January 2019. He left to start a new experimental studio within Krafton called PlayerUnknown Productions, which he later renamed Prologue Games. In interviews, he described his desire to move beyond Battle Royale and explore entirely new concepts in large-scale interactive worlds. It was a bittersweet chapter. The man who had ignited the Battle Royale revolution was stepping away from the game that made his name to pursue something no one had yet defined. The departure felt symbolic of the transition the game itself was undergoing, from an era-defining cultural force to a durable but no longer dominant live-service title. What does the story of PUBG actually teach us? Because there is a lesson here that goes beyond gaming, and it is worth sitting with for a moment. PUBG proved that a single idea, executed at the right moment, can change an entire industry. Before PUBG, Battle Royale was a niche concept. After PUBG, every major studio in the world was chasing the format. Fortnite, Apex Legends, Warzone, Fall Guys, Hyperscape. Every single one of them exists because PUBG opened that door. The game did not just succeed commercially, it created a genre. And creating a genre is one of the rarest achievements in the history of entertainment. But PUBG also illustrates the brutal economics of cultural momentum. Being first matters. Being polished matters. Being accessible matters. Being everywhere on every platform at the same time matters. PUBG was first, and that alone built it an empire, but it was not polished enough, not accessible enough, not fast enough to reach every platform before the competition arrived. Fortnite moved with a speed and a willingness to be free that PUBG could not or chose not to match. And in a landscape where players have infinite options and zero patience for friction, even a slight hesitation can cost you a generation of fans. The game today, as of 2025, still maintains a consistent and dedicated player base. PUBG regularly sees monthly average players in the hundreds of thousands, which is a testament to the loyalty of its community and the continued updates Krafton delivers. New maps, new seasonal events, new cosmetics, and ongoing competitive circuits keep the game breathing. It is no longer the cultural juggernaut it once was. It is no longer breaking Steam records or making mainstream headlines, but it is alive, it is loved, and its influence on gaming is permanent and irreversible. Every Battle Royale game you have ever played, every moment you have felt that rush of being the last person standing, every time you have heard a circle close in around you and felt your heartbeat rise, that experience traces a direct line back to Brendan Greene, to a mod for ARMA 2, to a $30 game that launched in March 2017 and turned the gaming world upside down. PUBG did not just rise and fall, it transformed everything it touched. And the genre it created will outlast the debates about its decline by decades. If you made it to the end of this video, you are exactly the kind of person this channel was built for. The Inventor realm is where we dig into the real stories behind gaming, technology, and the ideas that change culture. If this video gave you something to think about, subscribe to the channel so you never miss what comes next. Every single video we make is built to respect your time and your curiosity. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one.